Welcome to Alpha Talks. Born in Mumbai, Zainab is a transgender person. She currently works with Pernod Ricard India as the Chief of Inclusion and Diversity. Prior to this, she worked with KPMG as the Director for Diversity and Inclusion. She holds an MBA in HR and was the National Manager, Health and Human Rights at UNDP Country Office in India, and was also the Regional Policy Analyst of Human Rights in Asia. Welcome, Zainab. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. So, what does break the bias mean to you?
I think in a world full of constantly evolving matter, breaking the bias is something that we inherently as human beings need to invest in. Because I believe that everyone who has a brain has a bias. Not all biases are bad. Biases actually help us identify the right kind of people we want to interact with. In some cases, also the wrong kind of people. It helps us make day-to-day decision and intuitive decision making. But when I'm talking about break the bias, it's also calling out some of the inherent privileges that one has, and one may not be very mindful or cognizant of. Some of the microaggressions that we subconsciously or consciously perform on a day-to-day basis, the way we react, the way we act upon certain things, the way we look at differently gendered people or differently bodied people or differently able people, different orientations of people, and the very interplay of us with their realities is what I intend to do by breaking the bias. So, as human beings, I feel that all of us are consciously geared towards a higher reality. Our education, our background, our socio religious, cultural upbringing, what we consume in terms of media, what we kind of look at as inspiration shapes our thoughts. And that's the reason why we as thought leaders have this responsibility of helping people break some of the misogynist biases that we may have, some of the patriarchy related biases that we may have, to create a more just and equal world.
Whoa, thank you. That was amazing. Okay, could you share some of your experiences with bias, the prejudices, and how you have been breaking them in your own way?
So, Malini, interestingly, I still consider myself touchful, very privileged as a person. Privileged because I was born to a set of Catholic parents, and the only legacy that my parents left me was that go and complete your education. We did not come from a economically well-off family. My father was a truck driver and my mother was a homemaker. But as someone who was brought up in Christian values, we thought that education was the best gift that parents could give their children. So my parents, with whatever meager means they had throughout my childhood, and I was born in the Chawls of Patel, in a heavily industrialized area, teeming with mills and mill worker in a small two-room house, where access was limited, and so was you know things to go and play around, experiment. But that's interestingly, we had a Jesuit institution next to my house, so my parents sent me there to study. As I grew, I realized that I was very inquisitive by nature. So, I mean, interestingly, a lot of parents tend to get little off when you have very inquisitive children who ask the why behind certain. Why is this thing like that? Or why is it like that? Or why is it not like this? My parents, with their limited understanding of worldwide things, told me go and ask the kind of questions you always wanted to. And I'm thankful to God and my parents and the society around me who allowed me the freedom to ask these things. So as I grew up, my natural tendency was, okay, as a trans person, I dropped out of my educational institute twice, once during my graduation, once during my post-graduation, because of discrimination that I faced. And the discrimination was only upon how my body appeared to people. Now, this was not even like who I wanted to love, who I wanted to be with, just in terms of my own body expression. But today at 41, if I sit back and think of the time that has gone by, I was body shamed, I was name called, I was asked to get out of a class or many public spaces just because people were not comfortable with the idea of being around me. And I see the stark reality change that has happened 20 years down the line, where I feel fiercely, be my true self. And being my true self means carrying my body, because unfortunately I cannot leave my body out of a classroom, out of a boardroom, out of a meeting room. And that is number one. Number two, I think the fact that I could speak English and speak English in a very articulate and powerful manner really helped me um, look at some of the biases that people had for someone who's not had an A-list university education. So what happens is that we all have biases, and we have something called an affinity bias. We automatically gravitate towards people who look like us, talk like us, walk like us, exhibit, come to the same institution. And that is what is affinity. So unfortunately, I did not have any affinity to a particular institution, and hence I lost out because of that. That people said, okay, we can't relate to this person. She may have had an MBA, but she's not in the same league as us. The third thing was whenever people from marginalized communities try to make it big, so whether you're marginalized on the grounds of economics or caste or religion or body type or ability, and if you fail, if you falter, if you do something wrong, which is very much an intrinsic human thing to do, unlike because there is a saying in Urdu, "Sirf Allah ki zaat beaib hai," because everyone who's a human has some faltering. So whenever you fail, there's always this thing about the horns effect. See, I told you so. So I guess if I were to summarize my life's experiences, the following, the up, the getting up, the affinity, I could categorize. But the biggest challenge I think, Malini, today that I face is, if there's a trans person, she should be like Zainab. She should be articulate. She should wear clothes that merge in the background. When she walks into a room, people should be able to have a conversation with her and feel at par and feel there's something relatable. But that's also reverse stereotype. And I'm trying to say that not all women are the same. So not all trans people need to be the same in terms of, having the same kind of thing. So if you're possible as a woman, if you can speak great English, if you have a job that matters, that is also a kind of negative stereotyping that I have experienced, and hence resulting in its own set of biases.
Yeah, I can. That's so true. What you said is, either way, I mean, nobody wants to be put into a certain, certain box. You want to be yourself. So, how do you think, we can become more aware of our own biases?
I think the fact, even I, as a diversity and inclusion person who does this for a day-to-day living, I thought I was a very inclusive person until I went and took an implicit association test. So there is this test available online which helps you look at your biases. It's called an IAT, in implicit association test, and there are a host of things on gender, on race, religion, so on and so forth. You can keep on taking. And I thought I was a great person with disability, catalyst. I would say, yes, we need to get. But I realized there were so many inherent biases which I assumed that persons with disability would be like. But even if I did not take an implicit association test, the first thing is, let's look at our privilege. Let's look at our education background. Something, Malini, that we talk about very often, saying that, oh, we only work on merit. But the fact is that if merit is only based on access or certification from an A-listed university in a tier 1 city, what happens to the 99.5 billion people in India who do not have access to these universities? Are you saying that they all are devoid of merit? Of course, you will have a smaller pool of talent, which is really great, who manage to come to these universities to complete their education, to pay their fees either to their self, to scholarship, or to their parents, and come out with great flying numbers at the end of the course. But to say that tier 2, tier 3 cities are, B listed, C listed universities do not make the cut doesn't work. Like, for example, trans people. A lot of people tell me that we don't mind hiring trans people, or we don't mind hiring women, or we don't mind hiring persons with disability if they match this criteria. But the question is, who's making the investment in them? It's taken 75 years of India's independence today to realize the value of investing, say, in science and technology and women. It's taken us that long. It's taken us, you still not had reservations for women. So I'm just trying to say that without the right kind of investments, the entire argument is a little bit fallacious in that sense. Like, how do you talk about merit without making the investment in merit? So I think one is, look at your privilege, look at your background, look at the access to resources that you may have. Like, for example, if I were to tell you, Malini, and I were to address you as he, you may probably find it an irritant. You may find it, why is this person addressing me as he when I'm clearly a woman? I'm clearly dressed up. I look like a woman. I am a woman, biologically a woman. I'm dressed like one. And why is this person addressing me? And sometimes it may matter, sometimes it may not matter. We might just say that, okay, this person is probably making a mistake. But as a trans person, when someone misgenders us, and people don't realize that it's their privilege and upbringing which is preventing them from addressing me like the way I want to. Or for that matter, calling a person with disability specially abled, or I mean to say that there is an international term called persons with disability. You may mollycoat it, you may sugarcoat it, you may call people with special abilities and so on and so forth. But the fact is that there is a disability. There's an ability that doesn't allow you to be at par with somebody else. So I mean to say, in our own attempt at sugarcoating some of these tips or not sugarcoating some of, this all reeks of privilege. Like the other day, I was having this discussion, Malini, and this is, with our forthcoming project on the salon. And we were talking to this person, and she said that, but I go to my parlor and, I spend, and I don't feel like, I might not want to go to another. And I said, that's exactly the kind of privilege that you have, that you want to go to something which is 30 minutes from your house. But as a trans person, if I may want to go to someone which is 30 minutes away from I don't even know whether I have access to that parlor.
Absolutely.
So all that matters, like, for example, if you're all going to work and think, I need to reach a particular place in Churchgate and I need to take a train to reach there at my office at 9 a.m. But imagine all of those able-bodied people who are taking a train from Bandra to Churchgate, who will push, shove, and get into a train, versus persons with disability who just have one coach, who may or may not be able to, but they still need to travel in the same rush hour traffic to compete with you at 9 a.m. So this is understanding privilege and calling it out. I think that really is what would someone else who's in a lesser advantage situation do in this particular situation, which I always take for granted. I think it starts with just this.
Absolutely. I quite agree. I totally agree with that. What do you think organizations, that don't focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI as we now know it, what do they miss out on?
See, I think equity is still a long way off for a lot of people, but let's talk about diversity and inclusion. And this is my favorite pet topic. Let's say slavery, or black slave for that matter. It was perfectly legal for them to be enslaved about 60, 70 years ago. So parts of America and other parts, we still have colonies of black people. They were perfectly legal to have them as slaves. It's not even a century old, and it's still the legacy among people that they think that they have an advantage over black people is still there. It was perfectly legal for women not to vote because they did not have the right to vote, or for that matter, go to work. Like, for example, World War II. Why did women start filling in the workshops? Because there were no men around. People were dying on the battlefield. Industries had to be run. So women were given the rights and privileges to go to work in workshops. So I think if we look at this entire thing, we are very new to the concept, and we call this diversity and equity. So imagine getting women to work is diversity. So I think, for half of humanity's population to be able to want to work is still tagged under diversity and inclusion. So my question starts with our own understanding that, we need to get different people at the workplace. And 1 in 7 people in this world is a person with disability. Some of these disabilities are visible, some of these are experienced, and some of these are invisible. They could be on the autism spectrum, on a atypical advantage, on a vision related stuff, which sometimes even the person undergoing it may not be able to categorize himself or themselves as a person with disability. So the fact is that or an LGBT person, 5% of the world is known to be who prefers the same sex partner or different sex or a person with different gender identity and expression. So my thing is that, are we going to be so straight jacketed and privileged and say that, okay, my world exists only of this percentage of people who I assume are like me?
Correct.
If we were to take that mindset, we would have never started talking about women at the workplace. It's taken us 50 years to get to the point where we had to argue for compliance sake one woman in the board.
Correct. Absolutely.
So I guess this is a long sought journey about uncovering male privilege, about uncovering socioeconomic privilege, and uncovering able-bodied privilege to come to this discussion. And see, COVID has taught us that irrespective of whichever group you come from, you may have better access because of where you are, but COVID will spare no one. So the fact is that diversity and inclusion and equity is not something that is fancy, is not something that looks good on television or media awards or in the newspaper or LinkedIn article. It is what you live in your job, because no size fits all. We use this thing randomly, we throw it at each other. But the fact is that at a workplace, you may have similarly working people, but each of them come from a different background, from a different lived reality. And that's what makes a great team.
Correct. Absolutely. I mean, I think that's quite amazing. I'm so glad we are having this chat. And I hope a lot of people are listening in and, it will make a difference. We have something like No Shave November, wearing a pink ribbon to increase breast cancer awareness, or waving a rainbow flag to, show your allegiance in Pride Month. Do all these really make us DEI allies? What do you advise us?
Okay, so at the risk of being banished from the DEI world, I'm going to say this. Malini, these events, these celebrations, these demonstrations of allyship have certain brand value. Let's say that if it were not for people celebrating International Women's Day for whatever tokenistic value that it has, it wouldn't have made us aware that there is a day like women where womanhood is celebrated. And why? Because most of the other days are occupied and celebrated, say, by men. But then men, not to be outdone, wanted an International Men's Day also and an No Shave November to talk about. So I'm just talking about how the feeling of left behind is slowly creeping upon different sects of people, which is fair. I'm not saying that, don't celebrate an International Men's Day. Go ahead and celebrate it if you want to. I'm happy to acknowledge the presence of men beyond the biological function. And, but whether it's a International Day of Persons with Disability, whether it's a day marking cancer awareness, whether it's a day marking HIV awareness, these days are symbolic to help us reaffirm our commitment to a global fight against inequality. So for a certain section of people, yes, it holds value. Yes, it is important. But what are we only using these days as a mere celebratory or observatory day, or are we using these days as a door to step into the remaining 364 days with renewed vigor to work on these issues? Because you do not stop being women empowered 364 days. You do not stop being persons with disability empowered for 364 days. You do not stop being LGBT inclusion beyond 364 days. So if you are using those days to reaffirm your commitment to work on the remaining year on this agenda, great. Use that as a peg. But if not, I really advise people to rethink their participation. Wearing a rainbow lanyard, eating a rainbow cupcake, walking in a pride march is all great. But use that to reaffirm your presence, to recommit yourself to the cause. And that cause is not one day, it is to the entire year.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that it helps in starting conversations about these issues, which a lot of people sort of push under the carpet and they don't want to,
True.
address. So I think I just wanted your view on it, but I do think they're important in that aspect, definitely, because I know lots of people who just, I mean, it just doesn't
And
exist.
Malini, I think one thing that really happens on these days is that people become comfortable with what they have always been uncomfortable on. So on those
Exactly.
particular days, you get okay with someone talking to you about feminism. You get okay to people talking about rights of LGBT people. You get okay with people talking about the rights of people living with HIV or persons with disability or human rights, stuff that you sometimes may not agree to, something that you may never become. But those days allow you that degree of comfort to enter into a zone of being uncomfortable and yet still okay. I'm comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable.
So I think you're absolutely right. I think this discomfort has sort of come through so many years of bias, and I think we need to make that discomfort comfortable finally for everybody. So that's important. And what do you think again? How do you expect the workspace will change in the next 5 years to encourage people, different types of people, into the workspace? I mean, how the encouragement in for women, for transgenders, for you know differently able people.
So let's look at this in two ways. If there is a building complex being made and you see a truly cosmopolitan view of this, there are people who look at that advertisement around it and will come rushing and will say, oh, yes, this is, these facilities are great, but there's a multi-faith prayer room, there is access from, and you realize that most of the people coming in may perhaps not even belong to these groups, but they see this as a great inclusive area where they can be themselves. They can feel not only physically safe, but also psychologically safe. So my idea is, for that, and you might say, Hari, but how much do we invest for this 5% LGBT, for the 7%, 1 in 7 persons with disability, or a 30% gender? The question is that when you are investing into these communities to be more inclusive or to be more equitable, if you are already in that journey, you are sending a sign that yes, the younger generation wants to see this. Women who are making this career choice of moving from one organization to another, oh, this organization's policies actually sound fantastic. If I'm getting gender parity, if I'm getting parental leave, if I'm getting equal opportunity to benefits, I would like to be in this organization. It's a great pull factor. And when people today go to organizations, they do look at these kind of enabling stuff. It's not only the pay packet. At the end of the day, is that will this environment make me feel great? Will it make me feel celebrated? And when you bring in this elements, who are you celebrating? You're celebrating each and every one at the workplace. You're making people, so by giving that extra protection to say women at the workplace, making a cab available to take her at home in the night, making parental leave gender neutral. You're looking at the parent, not at the woman. If you're making wellness leave available for them, what are you trying to say? You are trying to say we value and we humanize the employee. So the human employee is not the LGBT employee or it's the employee. And I think what you're doing is by creating this equal space, you're saying that the world may not be the great place to work, to live, but my organization is the best place you can come.
Whoa, absolutely. So, like Bren Brown says, vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. So we both know that the term vulnerability is pretty taboo, in the workplace. So, as a leader, how do you find the courage to show up, be seen, and practice it?
See, Malini, I think when someone talks about celebration at the workplace, all of us keep talking about this term, come as you want, come as you wish, come dress for the day, or we truly respect you and celebrate. So when one comes to work, It's not that someone is walking in with a tiara every day. No, there are days you feel great, you feel supercharged, you have that performance bonus coming up, you have that very, very interesting project you want to start work on. You generally find like an endorphin high. It's up. But on other days, you're literally chugging yourself to work. You're pushing yourself to those elevators as you press to the bell to reach the. And I think a workplace should be able to recognize that as a human being, you don't not only have high points, you have medium and low points as well. It's while the organization recognizes and celebrates your high point, the support that you would give in your medium to low points is what actually differentiates you from the rest. Anyone will support a high performing colleague. Anyone does. But the question is that does the organization also create? Okay, we understand. We understand that menstrual leave is something that you may need or want to have access to. I leave that option open. Wellness leave, mental wellness is we all talk about it, but we don't understand it. Even in terms of celebrities today, they talk about the stuff that mental health, and it took them very, very long to accept their own needs. So I guess the fact is that when organization realize that there is a human within the employee that they have a family, they have personal needs, and every day may not be a great day. So when you're investing in this happiness quotient at the workplace, people want to come back. People want to feel 30% more retained in the organization. People will automatically become your brand promoters. So make those investments, and you do not need to come up with some fancy statements and give you this wellness gift spa vouchers. You can do that if you afford to do that. But the fact is that being mindful of small, meaningful steps all through the way, checking in, microaggressions, like for example, or micro affirmations. How many times are you as an individual open to the idea of a conflicting view from a junior and yet willing to listen? How many times you've thanked people for speaking up in a room full of boisterous and loud people? How many times you made space available for people to be heard and speaking up? So I guess when one talks about microaggressions at the workplace, she's too loud, he's too aggressive, that person is too pushy. What are the micro affirmations? So if you start off with that, and these are plain human behaviors, if we can call them human behaviors. So if you invest in that, you'll automatically understand, oh, there is a person who's dealing with a life event, not pregnancy, not marriage. She's dealing or he is dealing with a life event. Okay, we will need to put in some reasonable accommodations in place to help this person deal. So if you put these certain things in place, and today the digital world is full of resources, full of resources. We need to make the investment on making India truly great. And I believe that if you put these small things in place, some things that build people across cultural lines, religious lines, region lines, in addition to that, also helps to truly curate a workplace that is transformative.
Correct. Absolutely. So looking back, what advice would you give your younger self?
I think I would tell my younger self, thank you for being yourself. I am today all because of you. I don't want to change anything about it. You taught me to be fierce, to be brave, to be resilient, to never cow down in front of pressure. I mean, had it not been the difficulty that I had faced in those days, I perhaps would not be as evolved as I am today. So thank you so much for the 16-year-old self who fought through their college, who fought through two different institutions, who left home but yet managed to be successful at what they do.
Absolutely, Zainab. I think I would too. And I think thank you so much for being you. And it's been truly inspirational. Thank you so much for doing this for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manu.